Good afternoon. And today on the show, are you in a leasehold house where you pay ground rent even though you bought the place outright? It is a relatively new thing for houses.
Jeremy Vine, 88 to 91 FM, BBC Radio 2.
Now, in 2017, the government promised to take action on exploitative leaseholds, which homeowners said were leaving them trapped in unsaleable properties with spiralling ground rents. Nearly 2 years and around 10 government consultations later, nothing has changed. A leasehold property is one which is built on land owned by a person or a company known as a freeholder. The leaseholder buys the bricks and mortar, classically you and me, but pays annual rent and lives in the property under the conditions of the lease. Now, the lease could be as short as 40 years or as long as 900. And as well as ground rent, you may have to pay other service charges and fees to make changes to the property. People who own flats will be all too familiar with leaseholds. It's normal for there to be one landowner, with everyone who buys a flat above that piece of land paying them an annual fee. But there is a logic to that because of the complexity of divvying up the land. However, in the last decade or so, property developers have been selling huge quantities of new build houses as leaseholds. It's a new thing. Critics call it a scandal, saying it's totally unnecessary and it's just an excuse for developers to rake in extra cash. Reportedly, tens of thousands of new build leaseholders now regret their property purchase. And many say the ground rents they pay have doubled, and that means they can't even sell their homes. If that's you, we'd love to hear from you. Or maybe you can defend this whole new arrangement, leaseholds with houses. 08000 288 291. Email vine@bbc.co.uk. Let's speak first to Katie Kendrick, who lives in a leasehold new build exactly like I'm describing. Hi, Katie.
Hello, Jeremy.
So tell us about your house.
Okay, so I bought a new build from Bellway up in the northwest in 2014, 4-bedroom detached house. I knew full well it was leasehold. The sales lady said, don't worry, you can purchase a freehold for a couple of thousand after you've lived there for 2 years. So actually the long-term implication of what I was entering into was never fully explained to me, and I just thought it was an easy case of paying a few £1,000s.
So you were ready with the 2,000 at the point where you wanted to buy it, and then what happened?
The money wasn't the issue for me. I would have bought the freehold at the point of sale, but she told me I couldn't. I had to wait for 2 years.
Okay.
But what happened before we got to the 2 years was the freehold was sold on from beneath me, and the first I heard was when they wrote to me to say, you have now got a new freeholder.
I see. And then the terms changed?
And then the ground rent doesn't change because the terms of your lease cannot be altered. But what did change was all the permission fees. So, for example, to build a small conservatory with Bellway would have cost me £300 permission fee. But the onward sale of my freehold meant that my new freeholder wanted £2,600 for the same permission.
I see. And normally a householder would buy the freehold. This is the way it was always done back in the day, wasn't it? You buy the house with the freehold, and then you, as long as you've got planning permission, you can build whatever you want.
Absolutely. And a small conservatory that doesn't even need planning permission, so that's how small it was. But it was the onward sale of the freeholds that was apparently standard practice within the housing industry, yet they failed to mention that to the actual customers, that this was their intention all along.
So when the new property company got the freehold, or whoever they are, what did they jack it up to?
Well,
the cost of redeeming it?
Yeah, so I approached them to ask for a price to purchase my freehold, which they came back with just over £13,000.
From 2,000, wow.
From between 2,000 and 4,000, the initial sales lady told me it would cost. So they jacked it up to 13,000, but then they did actually come down to 7,600, which I declined because going directly to the freeholder is what's called an informal purchase. So they can keep all the same permission fees in that transfer deed. So I could, in fact, pay 7,600 for my freehold, which would mean I wouldn't pay ground rent any longer. But if I wanted to make any alterations to the property, those still stay. So I still have to ask permission.
And did you have a neighbour whose freehold was 5,000?
So our housing estate just across the road is a Taylor Wimpey house. So exactly the same design as mine, but was built by Taylor Wimpey. They have a different lease again. So their lease where their ground rents double every 10 years, which is the most onerous leases out there. So her her freehold purchase went from being £5,000 to £40,000 just with the onward sale of the freehold.
So the house that's unsaleable, that house then, is
Absolutely,
it?
Absolutely.
And they basically can't, there's nothing they can do to redeem the freehold themselves. So What do? They just stay in it till they die.
Well, this is why we're saying leaseholders are actually physically trapped in their properties. They can't buy their way out. The only way to escape from this is to buy your freehold. But for many, that is just not reachable.
And you set up the National Leasehold Campaign group on Facebook, and I gather that's given you a sense of the fact that you are not alone, to say the least.
No, I just thought this was a local problem in my local town, but it soon became evident that this was a national scandal on a national issue that affected so many people. And we've galvanised leaseholders up and down the country, and we now have over 14,000 members in the National Leasehold Campaign. We are recognised body within government where we get asked to give evidence at the Select Committee inquiry. So our voices are being heard at the highest level. Thanks so much, Katie. All the best to you. Katie Kendrick, whose house is a leasehold new build and who set up the National Leasehold Campaign. You can find it on Facebook. Sebastian O'Kelly is director of the charity Leasehold Knowledge Partnership. James Max is with us, broadcaster as chartered surveyor. James, I'm trying to think if there's any justification for putting leaseholds into the housing situation rather than the flats.
I think there is a justification, but when you hear a story like the one we've just heard, you wonder what it might be. The justification is that when you have a big selection of buildings and they're all built at once, if you don't have any control over what people can do to those houses, if people start to change them, to amend them, add extra floors, do all sorts of stuff, which maybe the leasehold might control to an extent over and above the property permissions that you would have to get planning permission.
Right, I see.
Then that starts to protect the whole. In addition to that, very often as part of a big development, you will see some communal land, you will see some areas that are sort of set aside for all the residents, and sometimes there is a communal benefit. However, if you are seeing ground rents being used as a tool to extract cash out of people, if you are using a system where to apply for permission you are having to pay onerous fees, that doesn't help anybody. So I think what you're seeing is that a few are ruining for the masses because there are benefits. And if you have a look at huge tracts of our cities, some of the very best, some of the highest value property is leasehold. And the reason that it's high value is because the contiguous ownership does mean that there is a benefit overall for everybody concerned because there's architectural merit.
Okay.
But when you're dealing with something where there's no architectural merit and they are simply doing it to rack it and stack it for cash, there is absolutely no benefit whatsoever. And this is why some change is probably required, but blanket change, be careful what you wish for.
Sebastian O'Kelly.
Yeah, well, I think that's nonsense, really. I mean, let's get one thing absolutely straight. Ground rent is for no service whatsoever. It's simply a way of hitching a ride on the property that belongs somewhere else and to get an income stream from it. This scandal has erupted because PLC house builders like Countryside Properties PLC and Taylor Wimpey have created clever revenue-generating leases, flogged them to their customers, often customers helped by us, the wider taxpayer, so through Help to Buy. So we've been cheated as well. And then these freeholds have been sold off to anonymous speculators, often based offshore. I'll give you an example of this. There's a fellow who got in touch with me just the other day. He bought a house through Land Homes in Liverpool. He wanted to buy the freehold. He was told the price of that was £7,500 in September. That's 30 times the annual ground rent of 250 quid. In the meantime, Land Homes sold this off to one of these speculators in freeholds. The price of that freehold is now 63 times annual ground rent at 15,900. This is ridiculous. It's predatory practices of people who really don't understand the ins and outs of residential property.
Because we mentioned Taylor Wimpey, I just want to give you a statement from them before I go back to you, James. Taylor Wimpey say, the vast majority of Taylor Wimpey's houses have always been sold on a freehold basis across the UK, with the exception of a small number of areas, e.g. in the northwest of England, where selling houses on a leasehold basis was a long-standing general custom and had become common in the industry over time, and specific sites where the overall development is held under lease. And they said from January 2017, they had announced all future sales of new builds would be on a freehold basis wherever possible. Crucial last two words. James.
I think there is a point to say, look, where people are using this to exploit value and people do not know what they are buying, then absolutely, I agree that this is a practice that needs to be stamped out. That having been said, if you have land which has a value, which it generally does, and you are trying to bring down the cost of housing, if you are able to create a revenue stream from it, then generally speaking, that means that you can probably sell the houses for less. I know it sounds like a sort of crazy scheme and somebody has to pay for it somewhere, but if you're going to buy for freehold right at the beginning, then chances are you are going to have to pay a higher price. So if you're trying to unlock sites, then sometimes this is a way to do it, and sometimes if you have high architectural merit or there is value in the whole as well as the individual, and managing that whole means that you have to have a central owner, that can be beneficial. But where people are using it, and this is where I agree with what Seb has to say, is if people are exploiting the system in order to simply take advantage of people who don't know what they're buying into, that is not acceptable.
And the problem seems to come, Sebastian, particularly where you buy the house, somebody has the freehold, you've accepted the arrangement that you pay ground rent and you can buy it back for a certain amount, and then the person who has the freehold sells it, and they sell it to pirates. That seems to be the problem.
That is the problem. Well, it's one of the problems. I mean, leasehold has no justification. We'll get onto that a bit later. But yes, it is the essential problem that why is there such a difference in price between what the developer is prepared to sell the freehold for and what a speculator is prepared to sell for? Now, a whole load of developers were called in by the Community Select Committee earlier this year and said that the difference in price would be a few £1,000s. Well, that's not the case. As you've heard from Katie, it's tens of thousands of pounds. People are hitching a ride on other people's homes here. And I'd say the wider question is, what is leasehold for?
Well, go and tackle that.
It was invented really by aristocrats in the 19th century to deprive the Victorian middle class of wholly owning their homes. I absolutely disagree with James that because the Duke of Westminster owns Belgravia, that accounts for the architectural splendour of that. I thought planning really accounts for that. But there is really no reason for why. There is no reason at all why people in England and Wales, the only countries in the world which have the leasehold system, have to put up with the sale of communal properties as tenancies.
Quickly, James,
everywhere else in the world has common hold. We should have it here.
Well, we don't necessarily have the only places. If you go to elsewhere in the world, you will find that there are similar-ish schemes. There are benefits to it, but I totally understand where people abuse the system, then it does create problems. But I think particularly when you have architectural splendour, if our planning system was better, you wouldn't need it at all. Our planning system is not fit for purpose.
Thank you very much, both of you. James Max, Chartered Surveyor and Broadcaster, Sebastian O'Kelly, Director of the charity Leasehold Knowledge Partnership. Love your thoughts on this. 08000 288 291. Leaseholds on new build houses. Leaseholds and the whole business of them coming in for houses, which seems incredible. I thought they were going to abolish them for flats, and they're bringing them in for houses now. Hannah Yates in Oxfordshire, have you got a leasehold situation going on?
Yes, I do. I own I am a mortgage tenant in a flat that I bought in 2001.
Right.
I cannot sell it. I haven't been able to sell it for 10 years. So the leasehold scandal is not just in houses, it extends to flats, and many people don't know they're in this situation yet.
Is your flat part of a block that is shared with others? I suppose that's the question.
It's part of an estate, and we pay a maintenance charge and a management fee to a management company who monumentally neglects the whole estate and neglects our properties for the extortionate fees that we pay. That's the main reason it's unsellable. We have escalating ground rents, which also the onerous clauses, such as ground rent, is another reason why the properties become unmortgageable.
Oh my goodness, so you've always got a house that's expiring on you. You can't sell it.
Yes, basically, and we will be in that problem quite soon, actually, because the other thing with leasehold is that you don't actually own the property. You have a length of time, the right to live there for a length of time. So when the lease reaches, when it's approaching 80 years, if you want to be able to sell your property, you're actually forced to renew the lease, which would cost tens of thousands of pounds on top of the maintenance fees that you've already paid.
What a rip-off.
So, yes, it is a complete rip-off. It's not an investment at all. The think that when you're buying a property, you think, oh, it'll go up in value just like the houses do. But in fact, that's not always the case.
Thank you, Hannah. All the best to you. Thank you. Mickey Dunn in Leicester says, I've been a leaseholder since 2003. The freeholder does nothing. They don't repair anything. They don't clean up the dog mess. I reported them to the council and I am going to withhold the ground rent until the situation improves. So unhappy for some people. Emily Jane Martin is in Northwich, Cheshire. You're on a new build estate.
Hi, yes, I am.
And so I gather some of it's leasehold and some of it's freehold.
Yeah, so the government started to look into the practices of leasehold a couple of years ago, and Sajid Javid announced that he was going to look to ban the sale. So our developers immediately stopped selling houses as leasehold and started selling them as freehold.
Which one did you get then?
So I'm sort of in the sort of first 30% of the estate. So the house I'm in is leasehold. I was told I could buy the freehold with the house, and then was told the day before the exchange that actually the developer had sold it. So what had happened was the developer sold all of the freeholds off to different companies, some of which don't even have a telephone number.
Oh, this is a nightmare.
Yeah, and so then, and I'm in one of those houses, had no notification that they were going to sell it. Nobody knew. They can sell the ground from underneath you without having to tell you, unless you're in a flat.
And sorry to drop, but does the comparison with the people who've got the freehold, does it make you feel worse because they're able to sell their houses easily, are they?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm pleased for them. They're not sort of in the same trap as I am. But if I was looking now to move on to this estate and there was 2 houses for sale, bearing in mind there's a lot of houses, you're going to buy the one where you don't have to pay to register a pet, where you don't have to pay to say you want a conservatory.
Pay to register a pet?
Oh, yeah, there's fees for over £100 to say you own a pet in your own house.
Oh, my goodness.
It's unbelievable.
Thanks, Emily. Gosh. Kev Richards emails, I'm stuck in a leasehold house with a very short lease. It is worth the house about $130,000, but Newcastle Council are the freeholder and they want $35,000 to buy the freehold. I was told I was lucky it was so cheap. I'm a pensioner. I don't have that money. It is currently unsellable, except at a giveaway price. Dreadful situation. Not many people sticking up for leaseholds, to say the least. Nikki Brogan text, the leasehold system is a disgrace. It's exorbitant to buy out the lease, but the poor house owner also has to pay if they want to make any improvements to their home. There are whole districts where every single new build is leasehold, so potential buyers have no choice but to get trapped.
BBC Radio 2.
Lots and lots on leaseholds on houses, because back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, it's a big row about leaseholds on flats, I remember, and the government said, okay, we're going to sort this out. And they basically, I think, give people the right to buy the leasehold on the flat, and that was all seemed to be basically hunky-dory. And now we have the story that they brought the developers have brought them in for houses. It just seems crazy. Annabelle in beautiful Frinton says, when you buy a leasehold, you don't buy the property, you buy the lease. The freeholder owns the property. My son lives in a leasehold house and he has to get permission for everything he does. I suppose that's the way to look at it. If you can buy a house with a freehold, or you can buy or mortgage a house without owning it. Do you want to do that? Alan Pennington in St Helens says, I bought a house 47 years ago. I then found out the lease was only for 99 years. I have now bought the freehold, but a lot of my neighbours thought it was a misprint. They were under the impression it was 999 years. Even some of the solicitors were confused. And we've already had the story of the guy who has to pay extra money on his ground rent if he wants to get a pet. Helen in Staffordshire emails, we bought our 60s built house in 2000 and it was leasehold, and then we had to buy the freehold after the purchase. Thanks for all your stories on that.